my big idea for the day, which is about psychological safety. Now, I think most of you are familiar with this term. I think it's something that is kind of almost mainstream. But if you're not familiar with it, in fact, I was at a San Francisco PMI group last night, and the speaker was talking about psychological safety in teams, and this is obviously an important concept. For those of you who are not familiar with psychological safety, I pulled up a definition. I don't think it's the definition, but it's one definition I found on the interweb somewhere. It's defined as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. It means being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences to self-image, status, or career. In psychologically safe teams, members feel accepted and respected. I think most of us understand this. And this comes to us mostly from Amy Edmondson. So if you're interested in doing some more research on this psychological safety, she's a good one to follow. She's a professor at Harvard Business School. Now, I came across the term psychological safety some years ago when I was running the Job Hackers nonprofit, which a lot of you are familiar with. We used to do mock interviews and resumes reviews, and one of the companies that was that we partnered with that helped us through Hands-On Bay Area was Google. And I remember going into Google's offices in downtown San Francisco, and I ran into a gentleman who worked on something called Project Aristotle. And we talked about this. What Google did is it found those teams that were the highest performing teams, and it asked themselves a simple question: what is it that these teams have in common? And you've probably heard me say this before if you've heard through the training and everything. They looked for what I would consider the usual suspects. They looked for how many years the people were on the job, what kind of degrees did people have, how much were they being paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I used to joke with my friend in Google. I used to say, I'd save you a whole bunch of money, because we learned to a certain degree in Peopleware, which is an old book that we used to cover in my class. We learned that, these aren't the things that necessarily dictate who the best developers were. And so what they did is they started looking for other things, and they started looking for what, sometimes we refer to as the soft skills, but really these soft skills are so much harder. So we've got to come up with another name that better describes them. But they found that there were 5 things that they had in common. And the most important factor was this concept of psychological safety. So it was important to understand that if the people on teams feel psychologically safe, that they're going to be more productive. And by productive, I mean they're going to deliver more value over time, right? Because everybody has a kind of definition. That's my definition. They're going to be the higher performing teams, and they're going to be the teams where the people are the most engaged, and they're going to be the teams where people feel good and not only feel good but work well. So it's a win-win, so to speak. And the thing that I've noticed is that we talk a lot about teams because that's where this Project Aristotle was emphasizing. But I also, came to me this insight, this aha moment, that it's not just the teams. It's also the managers. It's the executives. It's the leaders. It's other people around the teams that need to feel psychologically safe. And as Agile coaches, that's one of the things that sometimes we seem to forget. And so I got just a few, and so that's kind of the big idea is that if we're going to make change in an organization, we have to not just think about the psychological safety of the teams, of the people who are, individual contributors doing the work, but also the entire ecosystem. Because most of us who are in the world of Agile, and there's probably quite a few coaches here today, we understand that it's not just enough to work with the teams, but we also have to work with creating an environment within which the teams can be successful. And a lot of that is the people who, people on the team report to. So, recently we had, guests talking about what is it that we do with leaders, or what do we do with managers in the world of Agile? So that's really important, and they need to feel psychologically safe as well. I did some research just to give you some numbers. According to McKinsey, only 26% of leaders successfully create psychological safety within their teams. So this is not something that is, widespread. This is basically 1 in 4. And that was according to the leaders, because individual contributors, when they do studies, factor 8 to 12 percentage points lower than their leader perception. So the leaders are perceiving that they are creating psychological safety, while the teams themselves, the people on the teams, say it's not happening. And I think that, parenthetically, with all the things that are happening today and the layoffs and everything else that's going on, I would assume that the percentage of psychological safety is pretty low. And that's a shame. But again, not just the teams. Only 42% of managers feel psychologically safe, and only 57% of executives feel psychologically safe. So it's not just the teams, it's middle managers. In fact, I think middle managers often have a tougher challenge with psychological safety, because they're caught in the middle. They have the demands of upper management and the needs of the people that are their direct reports, and this leads to pressure from both sides. And so it can really make it difficult for middle managers to feel secure in taking risks or speaking up. And if we're doing a transformation, it's going to be really, really difficult if the people that we need to help us with that transformation are not feeling safe. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that organizational transformations don't generally work well. And a lot of times, the folks who are doing these transformations, myself included, will comment it's the middle management. But are we asking the question, are they psychologically safe? And it's not just middle management, but it's also high-level executives. I mean, the one thing that I've been very fortunate in my career is working with C-level executives. Obviously, they feel a lot of times that they have a huge burden on themselves. Now, we may not feel for them and say, well, they're the ones who are making the big money, but it is not necessarily an easy job. And as I'm going through the research, 40% of all leaders agree that if they make a big mistake, it's going to be held against them. So the question is, for me, if we cannot feel psychological safety within the rest of the organization, how are we going to feel psychological safety with the team? So I think it's important that we understand that psychological safety is not just for the teams, though it's really important, but it's really something that we have to look at for the entire culture, and we need to help everyone to feel psychologically safe. And unfortunately, I think it's getting harder and harder, given what I can only describe as a current mania about shedding workers. So that's my big idea for the day.